My name is Vitaly Lupish, and it's spelled Lupish, and the first name is Vitaly. I was born in December 1935 in what was really, for centuries, Belarus, or Belorussia as it's generally called. We were part of the Russian Empire at the start of the World War One in 1914. And in after the war, there was a big conference of the participants and the combatants in Versailles Palace outside Paris. After that conference, the whole European geography was changed. Three empires ceased to exist, three, including Russia, and the map of Europe was changed. And we, that part of Belarus where I was, of course, come from, and I wasn't born yet, of course, they were given to the new Republic of Poland. And their first president, that's Polish, was the great piano virtuoso Paderewski, the pianist. He was renowned, of course, traveled the world, concert tours, etc. And then he was so until sometime in 1931, I think, another guy took over, and his name was Pilsudski, Joseph Pilsudski. He was a military, he was a general, and he was a little bit of a dictator. However, we as Belarusians did not suffer any problems with all. You just had to be loyal to the Republic of Poland. You have to sing the national anthem, etc. My father was born in 1906, my mother in 1909, and my father served 2 years in the national service, in the artillery, but the artillery in those days was drawn by horses, so it wasn't motorized. So that's why, and we were part of Poland, everything was okay. And then on the 1st of September 1939, another gentleman by the name of Adolf Hitler attacked this Poland country and overran it in 3.5 weeks. Of course, I was born in 1935, but I do remember to this day vividly the first day of the war. I will not go into detail, but I remember a plane flying overhead in the village where we were at the time. And my father had me in his arms, and he approached another man, or another man approached us, and they stood in the street and talked. I don't know what they talked about, but I could feel excitement, and they were pointing at a solitary plane, which to me looked like as I got used to know here in Australia, tiger moth. So the slow World War One stuff, I presume. I don't know. Unknown to us and all of Europe and the world, Mr. Adolf Hitler sent his foreign minister, Baron von Ribbentrop, to Moscow. And there he talked, and they secretly signed with Molotov, Vyacheslav Molotov, the Soviet foreign minister under Joseph Stalin. They signed the secret documentation that they would be friends, and of course they will do things to Europe from then on, which didn't come to fruition because, but by the way, after we were invaded, Mr. Hitler gave us as a present, I'll call it Christmas present, to Mr. Stalin. And so overnight, we saw outside our house on the street Soviet soldiers moving around. And we were so under Soviet Union occupation for the next 18 months, which made that my parents were in dire fear, and others, and they were absolutely terrified from the nation that whose language we actually spoke nearly identical. However, 18 months later, Mr. Adolf Hitler hit Stalin. He ripped up that paper written secretly, only now do I know about it, all about it, and attacked Soviet Union. Overnight we became German again, and the Germans. So I remember that very well. And the thing is that Germans did not harm us in any way, but they did, of course, the Jewish sector of the population. Everybody knows what happened and the terrible things that happened in the middle of 20th century, unprecedented, however. But strictly speaking, of the two men in question, the worst of the two was Mr. Stalin, because he was responsible. You can all check this in whatever way you wish. 21.5 million of his own people lost their lives because of him. It was planned. There were 7 million, I think, and a quarter million that were starved to death in Ukraine, the southern part of Soviet Union, because the people that didn't want to be collectivized into collective farms, so they starved. I know one gentleman now deceased who was in the Red Army, and during his leave from the army, he went back to his town, a town where he was Ukrainian, and he saw dead bodies lying in the street in those years. This is 1930s. When the tide of the war turned against the Germans, after Stalingrad, Leningrad, etc., when the Germans were on the retreat, my parents, while we were under their occupation, we knew that we would not survive. So my mother, late mother, Mary, was preparing bagfuls and bagfuls of bread that she toasted in the oven in our house. That was to survive our trip to Siberia. My parents, I remember my mother in summer, when we were under Soviet occupation, trembling, and I would ask her, "Mom, why are you trembling?" And she wouldn't say because I was scared, because she simply said, "I'm cold." Well, that was enough for me. Well, you tremble when you're cold. I even knew that then. But the thing is, so my father decided to get out of the thing. So he got 2 farm cars. We had one, but he bought another one from one of the people in town. We were already then in town, not in the village where he originally lived. Well, then in 1944, in May, as I'll return to the reality, 2 horse carts drawn. One was being driven by my mother, and the other one open. There was none of this Wild West wagon trains. No. Completely open. Several belongings. Some of those belongings I still have. They have traveled all the way, and we went west, way into the unknown. Now, because of German cruelty, some of our people they went bush, so to speak, and they formed these guerrilla bands, and they were joined by Russian prisoners of war who escaped the Germans. Is it okay? And they would, wherever they would see Germans, bang, bang, they would eliminate them. On one occasion, a group of our own people were caught in a crossfire. 10, I remember that occasion. That would have been 1940. This northern summer of 44, shortly before we left, and so we then, of course, went. We went partly through. So there were gangs all over, and we went through forests and everything. An incredible, dangerous thing. We had to move off the road, which were gravel roads, the German, because German trucks with soldiers were tearing past, so we had to get out of the way. They would have run us over. I mean, we were completely at their mercy. They could have done anything. On one occasion, we sort of bivouacked, stayed, and I saw straw. There was straw. Somebody stayed there before, and there was blood on the straw. So that means something happened there. But I did see before we left, one guy. We went to into the city town square. One man who had bandage around his head, and his lower jaw, was blown away. So he was being taken by cart to somewhere, to a hospital, where I don't know. But he could just speak just very, very, very poorly, and there was blood just dripping in. I saw that myself. But having said all that, I did not evolve into some kind of ghoul, or I think I'm normal. I think I'm normal. I don't have any.
So you were a child when you were like 8 or 9?
I was 9.
You were 9. So
I would have been. I became 10 in Germany in 45 because we had such big forests. My mother with other ladies, we would go into these big forests and we would pick bucketfuls. They would pick of berries and all kinds of things and mushrooms. Those were the Pripyat marshes area. Now, on any map you will see that area marked in a certain way, and actually it's below the sea level. No. The partisans used those marshes. There were little islands on it where they hid, and where the Germans couldn't just march in there but there with the small bands they lived very, very nice. I remember them coming at night. This is this is going back to the village. This is 1942, 43.
And the village is?
Deremnaya, yes. I remember waking up, my brother and I were waking up. But what actually happened? These bands of guerrillas, partisans, they at night, they wanted at night, they moved because during the day they would get caught by the Germans. They would call at my parents' place, which was basically a rectory, so to speak. And they knew they would be welcome there. Because my father was a priest, they would get fed, they would be welcome there. And on one occasion, I remember we just had dinner, and there was the window there. My mother said, "There's something moving there," and up the shed that was behind. My father said, "No, there's no one. There's no one there. The dog is locked, and the cow, I think, was also on the tether over there." But a little later, there was a knock on the door, a very special type of knock. And so my mother went to open it. There was the guerrillas that came through. But at one time, and they sat and talked. I don't know whether I think they might have been given food. But I sat on the stove. We had this stove in those days. They still have them there, in Russia even to this day. It's made out of bricks, I suppose, and there's a shelf, and you can sit there or even lie, and some people do that, which I did a number of times, and I sat there very late. It probably was after midnight, and I didn't know what they were talking about, but I got very, very drowsy. However, and went to bed, but on another occasion I was lying in bed in the room that my brother John and I, occupied, and and then suddenly I woke up, and middle of the night, and there was a light in my face. The room was completely dark, of course. This is back in the village still, so this is 42, 43, and there was a face looking this far away from me, a bearded face, and sweating, and that a man, obviously, yes, and he had a small torch, and he was shining at me in my face. Well, I think I did get scared as to what was complete foreigner in somewhere, not anyone in my family. However, this was a group of partisans who called, and they just checked out everything. They went and looked at the two boys, I suppose. I don't know. However, but there is something which I'm very proud of. The Germans came, which was their habit, a small unit of them, I don't know, maybe 5 Germans, and they had with them to our village, they had with them a Polish guy. He was Polish by birth, so he was not Belarusian, and he was my father's at their wedding the best man. I don't know his name. There is a photo of him, however, and they went to our village and they grabbed 3 men, our people, the parishioners basically. They went outside the village. Obviously they were in a truck. They took them and they lined them up after talking with them, after grilling them and so on. But then they decided to do something rather awful. And apparently one of the parishioners who was so worried, she ran all the way from the other end of the village to our parents' house, which was the rectory, and she said that the Germans have arrested those people. And when my father immediately walked there, oh, he didn't run, and I had them lined on the bank of a little river, we had a creek, and they were about to shoot them. And they were already there, they had enough of this, and they were going to shoot them. Through this interpreter, ex-best man of my father's, they were going to, he said they were going to shoot them. And my father said, no, they are innocent. They are my parishioners, I know them, and etc., which was a fact. And they let them go. So my father was instrumental in saving 3 humans from being shot for nothing, which was a common practice, people being shot. Nothing, no problems. But my brother, of course, was 2 years younger than I, well, actually 1 year and 10 months, and excuse me. So we sneaked out, because if the Germans found out there were guerrillas visiting us, bang, bang, my father wouldn't have survived the moment. Certainly my father, maybe even my mother, but not the kids. They wouldn't have shot us. No. So it was dangerous. And during the day, the Germans called also, generally with an interpreter, as witnessed this best man, and to translate between German, etc. Yeah. And they would come during the day, and now they knew that the other party was colluding, or so to speak. But so it was dangerous, and my parents decided to move into a town called Antopol, Antopol, yeah, which is about 70 kilometers from east of Brest. Now, there is a Brest, and this Brest was called Brest-Litovsk, which means Brest of Lithuania, as different from the Brest, city of Brest on the western shore of coast of France. It's called Brest. They decided to do something very, very tricky. My parents, my father went to the town, this Antopol. He actually arranged well before that we would rent a house, a cottage. I have a picture of it, an aerial picture of it. In fact, from the satellite, which my son did about 3 years ago. And then my mother with us, the 2 boys, she packed some gear into a carriage. She drove. She was the driver, and it was all concealed, so that they went at a certain time of evening, or was it? I can't remember that. But and then finally, when I wake up the following morning, we were in another house, which, by the way, had thatched roof. Anyway, and we were there, so we were safe. On one occasion, there was an all-out attack on the town by guerrillas. There were probably hundreds of them, and they attacked the Germans who were in the town. There were units of them, I don't know how many. And I remember waking up in the middle of the night. There was a lot of shooting. There were lights, so I could see through the window. And my mother put us kids on the floor with these. There's a European practice of having feathers in a bag, because it's cold. They use them. They're big bags, and you cloth, cotton maybe, or whatever. And so we lay there until everything quieted. And the following morning, the neighbors and everything, we found out that they had a big attack. The German main, the building where they were was damaged, but that's the end of it. So, and then of course the Russians, the Soviets were coming. The army were, the Germans were on the retreat. So we packed all those two horse carts and we continued on. And then we got to a town. We went halfway through Poland. And it's crazy. Mm-hmm. 2 horse-drawn carts. By the way, when we got to the Polish border, suddenly there was a bit like a forest clearing, and there were several wagons there. There were some people, and guess what? There were people from our village. They decided to move. Their pastor, or their priest, or their parish priest, they found he had gone west. So but it's such a coincidence. Mm-hmm. And so there were in all, there were probably, I don't know, I have to look at I have the receipt from
so
the
parish priest was your father?
Yes.
Yes. So they were amazed at the coincidence that they were escaping
They decided to go. They learned that from others, he's gone west. Yeah. He's gone. Yeah. They decided to follow him. Yeah. One of them, there was one guy in that who had been to America, so he spoke a little English. Interestingly, some years ago, I think maybe about 35 years ago, I had a call here. I was sitting there from a granddaughter of his in America, because they immigrated to America, Chicago. Now, that man has died, of course, but the thing is that so that we went through this town called Poznań, not Poznań, Pomienice, and Poland. This is Poland now. A lot of Germans there. I see their caps with the skull and bones, with the lugers, you know. You were completely at their mercy. There were hundreds of them. But in that city, they apparently, somewhere either before we arrived there or after, there were something like 5,000 Polish Jewish people were shot, executed outside town somewhere. That I only found out about that here in my reading some years ago. However, back to this, because we were fed, but while we were traveling there, we used to stop at creeks and fish, catch fish, and cook that, and so we were not very well off in that particular area. But in this city, there was an office, a German command office. I remember entering with my father, and there was a big counter. There were interpreters and German officers who were taking your details, and they recorded us and all my father's expeditioners. But what actually happened? This is remarkable. Behind, my father spoke, of course, Russian. Didn't speak two other languages. Russian was the most common. And there were some Germans who spoke Russian because their parents and grandparents immigrated after the 1917 revolution to Germany. Anyway, but behind...
So what did you speak at home with your parents?
Russian. Oh, the mixture of Russian and Ukrainian.
Okay.
It's a bit of a jargon type of thing. But the reason why that was so is because my parents had gone to Russian school during the World War I, and etc. But we were not apparently forbidden to speak other language or speak only Polish, because not many people did speak Polish, some years. I mean, there was a theological academy in Warsaw, for heaven's sake, that produced graduates in theology of the Orthodox Church. They had a magnificent cathedral of the Orthodox denomination, so to speak, in Warsaw, the capital of Poland. There was a tap on the shoulder as my father just finished talking through interpreter to the German who recorded. By the way, they took our horses away, everything away, because they were going to put us on the train. Many people chuff us off to Germany, Bavaria, the southern part. Really, the capital of Bavaria is München in German, and of course the favorite lair of Adolf. He loved München. I mean, he did his coup in 1923, and they arrested him. He wrote his Mein Kampf, which means my fight. He didn't write it. Another guy in the cell wrote it. He dictated it. It was a Bible for the Nazis. Anyway, so there was a tap on the shoulder. My father turned around, and there was a tallish guy in his 30s or something, and he spoke to him in Russian. And he said, "Who are you?" And with him there was apparently a colleague of his. I don't know his name. And he had a factory in a particular town in Bavaria. And this Russian guy said, and my father identified himself, and he said, "Well, look, my mother is now aging, and she lives, I have a brick making factory in a town called Dinglefing, down south, and and she would like for her, she's a pious person. In order for her to attend some religious event or whatever, she has to travel all the way to Munich, 100 kilometers, exactly 100 kilometers away, up north. So how would you like to, if I got you, I will get lodgings for you, and you can tend to her spiritual needs." And then my father said, "Well, all right, but I have," and he named how many of my former parishioners. Oh, so he talked in German to his friend, and his friend is Fritz Fuchsel, Fuchel. He had a factory which made trailers. I have photographs of these trailers, and actually, anyway, so they talked, and he said, "Look, okay, he's prepared to take your people to this town. There's a small camp with only 6 huts, ex-army. You can live in that camp, but your men could work in his factory. Whether they will be paid or not, I have no idea." And so that was it. So they put us on a train, and we traveled to there. However, we traveled through Dresden, the city of Dresden, the train. I remember that, but I remember later on the adults were saying that Dresden was wiped out, bombing, courtesy of Air Marshal Harris, Bomber Harris, with all the English men. Anyway, so we got there, and they put us, well, took us to the camp. The camp from the station where we stopped was only about a kilometer, but our belongings, the ones we had, and they put us on these trailers. There were about 15 trailers with us on top of them, and our belongings drawn by one single tractor. I have a picture of it. I can compile something of it to this.
So you end up in Germany? Or where?
Germany.
Okay.
This is Germany now.
So your carts are confiscated. What made you? Did you feel fear
Cars,
being put on
horses,
a train? And
I'm sorry?
If Germans are putting on a train, that would make me very nervous.
Yes. Well,
how do you know you weren't being sent to a concentration
Well, we didn't know we were
camp?
taken to Auschwitz or Treblinka.
Okay, all right.
No, we didn't.
Okay.
But the guy, my father trusted this Russian young man. He wasn't married then. He said that this would happen. And my father and his people, they would give their lives for my father.
Yeah.
I mean, as I found out over the subsequent years, and so we lived in this camp, and the camp had the name of Izar Moros, because through the city of the Dingelfing, I have an engraving of that city, and some photos, but engraving is downstairs in my study. So, and then in April, so we lived in that camp quite well, but then the war was getting closer. My father somehow, through this guy, negotiated that we would leave the camp because we felt it would be dangerous, so us, four of us. We would stay at a farmhouse about 5 kilometers away, a farmer there, and he was very nice. We would have meals with them. They looked at whether that guy paid that farmer anything or not, I have no idea. But
you looked after.
We looked after. And we were there for about 5 or 6 days. But on one occasion, we had barley fields, wheat fields. Suddenly I saw, we were outside, we were up in the attic, there's just one room, and I have a photo of the farmer taken later. Anyway, I saw something above, just projecting above the wheat, tops of the wheat. I didn't know what it was. It turned out to be jeeps. A column of Americans were moving there. But then a little later, up there was a mountain range just not by, with forest, and we saw 3 tanks came up. We saw them, and they stood there. That would have been maybe 5 kilometers away, but you could definitely see it. My parents got very excited because tanks are, you don't fool around with tanks. And then suddenly there was a puff of smoke in turn from each one of them, and then boom! They were shelling the other side of the town, the city, town, not city, and and we heard the lady, the farmer's wife, saying Amerikanische, which in German means American, excitedly. Anyway, we got back to the camp, and then before that, there was not straight to the camp, but before during the war, the latter stages, we dug up, the men in the camp, we dug out a bit of a hole, and we used logs, and we put logs on top and then earth, and that was going to be our shelter. So the whole camp load of us, and there were at that time, there were probably 150 of us in all, because some other people wandered in. One was a Polish guy, I have a picture of him, who was a ballet choreographer in Warsaw. He spoke Russian, of course, and he had two daughters, and they seemed to be, well, they were nice, obviously they were dancers. Yeah. However, and we all packed into them, we were waiting there to see what was going to happen. And then suddenly, on this occasion, one day we were there, we saw from the main road between us and the factory an American tank with a star and strip, turn into there and go into the camp at fairly high speed. Yeah. And then between the houses we couldn't see what was happening. And then the tank came out and was bearing against us with the turret gun pointing at us, coming in there. And we didn't know what was going on. We know that they could shoot, of course. I mean, I knew anyway even. And they came up and they stopped. There was just one entrance, just logs. And they stopped maybe, I don't know, it's from here to the mailbox there, which is what, maybe 20 minutes maybe. And stopped, and there was a guy on the turret, American, with goggle, with some kind of thing, and the one jumped out of there with a gun, and threw the gun, just normal shooting gun, hunting, on the ground, and the tank ran over it. They just ran over it, you know. They got it somewhere. Okay. It wasn't their gear, anyway. And then he jumped out and came towards us. I would imagine that all these adults were frightened, absolutely. And then he spoke something. And this Mr. Konetsky, who died in Chicago, who immigrated to America, he came out and he spoke something, obviously in broken English, with this soldier army. When I inquired, he said, "Oh, they just went away." But why did the men go away and not the family? Anyway, the system. Anyway, but the.
So we're picking up.
Okay.
The Americans have arrived.
Yes, and we were suddenly there was a jeep marked with the American star. Yep. And the two strips, and it was marked UNRRA, Team 542. I remember the number. My brother has a photo. I don't have it. Okay. My mother gave those photos to him, part of them to him, part to me, before she died. However, it was United Nations Refugee Rehabilitation Association. They fed us. They gave us needles. We were emaciated.
What year is this?
This is 1945.
Okay.
This is now Americans here. But on two occasions, I remember I was there with us. An American jeep comes in, driven by a GI, and then in the back, sitting with him is a soldier with different uniform, a Soviet officer, and they came especially to the camp, got us together. We were all together in the middle of the camp. There was only 6 huts there, and weatherboard, and they were saying, "Go back to your country. You will be welcome there." And nobody did, because we knew what happened to several of those people who went from other camps. They never came back, ever, and they were obviously executed as spies for Hitler. Spies for Hitler. Anyway, the thing is, I remember our people shouting at them. I don't know what they were saying, but obviously they were abusing him, the Soviet officer. And then before long, they drove away. The next time that they came, it could have been 3 times, but certainly the next time, a jeep came in with being driven by a GI, and next to him was a guy with a helmet MP on his arm, and the officer was there because they were fearful that people would attack and beat up the Soviet officer. He spoke But then they also in a room in one of the house, the dining room next to the kitchen room. They on the stage, there was a little stage. They put Soviet communists put cans of food like baked beans or something. I don't know what, and they put them in a pyramid fashion. And there was a sign. I didn't read it, but I know, but because I found out, there were 2 or 3 of these pyramids there on the table. If you go back to your own country, back home, you'll get all these cans in one hit. So they tried everything.
So, Vitaly, how did your family then come to Australia?
Okay.
What were the circumstances?
That's
leading
important.
Into that?
Yeah, I've been beating about the bush. I
That's all right.
apologize.
That's a good. So the UN has come and basically rescued you.
Yeah, and they fed us. And I remember getting food parcels from the UNRRA. They were like that.
So they couldn't get you to go back home. Where did you go from there?
Well, but we were being fed by them, and there was inside these packages, by the way, was one Nestle's condensed, sweetened condensed milk. That's how ignorant I was. Well, we were in those days. Now, my grandkids, they're smart. One is 10, one is 8. The ones in Newcastle here, Edinburgh. However, it said made, I could see that, made Made, M-A-D, I read in Polish, I thought it should be in Australia. That's, anyway.
Was that the first connection to Australia?
Exactly. For me, yes.
Okay. And
Later,
did you know where Australia was at that time?
But the other thing, Gianni, is that I was already in second year high school there in the camp high school, which was of Russian denomination. Yeah. We had a very good teacher. He started telling us about Australia. He knew, because he probably was a geography man from the past. He also immigrated to Germany. However, he had a son, good soccer player. That's how I got involved in soccer. However, the thing is...
The milk, you're seeing Australia in
yes,
milk.
yes.
The teacher in the camp was telling you about Australia?
Yes, I was second year high school.
Yeah. When
we arrived here to Greta Camp on the 19th of August, anyway, that's another story, I'll come to that later. But at Greta Camp, there were 1,896 of us on board Fairseas, 432 children. I was 14 and a bit. That year I turned 15. I wasn't 3 years old. I was a very observable boy. I always have been. Now I know. I still am. Even with my stroke, I'm still able to observe and make deductions. However, they put 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17-year-olds in the 6th class. We came here during the school holiday, and then when the school resumed about a week later, we were these 17-year-olds in the 6th class. Mm-hmm. The headmaster was Mr. Bruce Cox. And then they were in the school because we didn't speak English.
In Greta?
In Greta.
Yeah.
No. I didn't speak no English. No speaking no English.
Yeah.
So they had to teach us, But as soon as the year came to the end, to December, school year, all those who were 15 chuffed off, started working. Mm. At 15, you could leave school in those days. And mind you, this was the good old days. So I travelled, and others we travelled. I was enrolled in Maitland Boys High in East Maitland.
Yeah. Just backtrack a little.
Yes.
How did your family leave that? How did they get to Australia?
Oh,
so well, what did your father do to get there?
Of course.
So you've jumped into Greta, but
of course.
I've got to fill in the gaps.
Oh, I apologize for all this shenanigans, but no. We then decided, we were then told by the authority, and IRO came in, International Refugee Organization, also, and they said to us, and they were...
If you're not going home, you've got to go somewhere else.
No, that's right.
Okay.
So we were apparently told, you either go back to your old country, we can't keep you in these camps, feed you and look after you, or you choose a home in one of the following countries.
Okay.
In all 14, all of the countries of South America, USA, Canada, England, Australia, and New Zealand. And my parents made the best choice.
Yeah.
We had to then say we were going to go to Australia or whatever.
And this is inspired by the Nestle milk?
No, I don't know. I had no say in that.
Yeah.
But
What made your parents choose Australia?
the general feeling that I got,
Yeah.
and I heard Edwards talking, is to get further away from the communism,
Okay.
Soviet Union. And that's a long distance here. That could hardly, but some of our people even changed their surname. So they still were afraid of Soviets, that I'll get here and get them something.
So you were more afraid of the Soviets than you were of the Germans?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, we were not afraid of Germans. My parents never were afraid of Germans. We knew they could shoot us as well, but it's more likely that would happen with the Soviets.
Okay.
Oh yes. And besides, we were not Jewish. So, but so we had to go to a city called Amberg, still in Bavaria, and there were thousands of us refugees. We were referred to as displaced persons, DPs. Of course, the Prime Minister of Australia, this is 1949. The man in Canberra was Ben Chifley, so we had to go to the city, and we were then billeted there in buildings in the center of the town, and we were going to be like other countries, but Australia certainly. We were grilled, checked, double-checked, we were questioned. They used to. I was in a room where they were at a table. They were sitting 3 Australian representatives, of course, government, of course, immigration, I suppose. And I remember them asking questions of my parents through an interpreter, and that's it. But then we went there a number of times. I would venture to say as many as 7 times. And I remember them asking the same questions. And I had paperwork on there, and they were making notes. So the main thing, now I know, I've known this now for a number of years, was try to weed out any former Nazi sympathizers, or indeed any Jewish people. And this is 1949. Why that was with Jewish, I don't know. Although there were Jews here since the First Fleet. And the Frank Lowy is, Freudenberg is Jewish, etc. And anyway, now, and then after all that finished, you were then told you have to now go through medical tests. And so these medical tests, examinations, where you had to, so that could get everybody in good health. Now, I remember as a boy, we went to sort of one room, and women in another room. I remember ladies talking, I overheard them. They didn't know that this boy was listening, how they were embarrassed and unhappy. What a thorough examination, private, personal, was meted out to them. Anyway, back to the boys. They put some pump-like thing with white powder. It's put it in DDT, whatever, I don't know, to prevent any life developing anyway. And then suddenly on the PA system, they would say, in 4 languages, they would say, attenzione, attenzione, attention, attention, внимание, внимание in Russian, and Achtung, Achtung in German. And then they would read names. Not 60, but generally 20, I suppose. I would hear them every day. You had to go to the office, and then they told you, you were in, you can immigrate to Australia. And so we then boarded the train, well, there would have been maybe 500 on this train of us, DPs, and we then traveled down south through Austria and into Italy, and we stopped for 2 days, and I saw for the first time sea, the Mediterranean. Somebody said that in Russian, more, but more. I couldn't see. I could see just a line. I never saw sea. And we stayed at a place called Senegalia. Do you know that name?
No.
Senegalia. It was a transition camp.
Yeah.
We stayed 2 days. Then we went further, boarded the train again. Our goods, of course, being taken care of by somebody else, our belongings. And we traveled further, and we stayed for a month in a place called Capua, Capua. It's a historic Roman city.
Yeah.
The wealthiest of Romans, aristocracy, had their villas there. Anyway, I've got a picture of that. I made a sign. There were hundreds of tents, and we stayed in these tents. There was a dining room that you had to walk to, and you were fed there. All this by IRO, of course. And then we were there for a month. We went one day with permission to the town, and to a marketplace there, and there were Italians, of course. And I saw, and I felt very sorry. There was a very oldish gentleman, and I felt very sorry the way he had various vegetables, and there were beans in front of him. I knew what he was because it's similar to the Slav name. He would say fazoli, fazoli. I felt very sorry for him, as he was in pain or something. Anyway, it's beans.
Fagioli.
Yes. Anyway. So one day, one occasion, hot, stinking hot. Absolutely. We've never experienced this kind of heat any time, anywhere in our. Back in the old country, my father tells me what the temperature apparently was down to -27. The other birds, the swallows and the cranes would fly to Africa. The only bird that stayed behind were the sparrows. And he said that on some occasions they would fly and they would flutter and fall down to the lack of food, snow. My father had to dig ourselves out the front door. Anyway, so from that kid to the Capua. Anyway, so and then we boarded train again and went to Napoli, and we stayed in a suburb called Bagnoli. You know about it. Apparently, I found out much later he had hunted a stationer in Hunter Street. I was looking through some books and I found one. I just looked at it, and I found out this Bagnoli had these buildings where we stayed, built by the Italian government of Benito Mussolini for the officer corps of Marshal Irvin Rommel, who went to North Africa and fought Australians and English, etc. And the Tobruk Reds, all that stuff. And they were built for him, and we were staying there. There was a dining room for us, they cooked everything. And then we were there for about a week. And then we were then taken by buses to the harbour. From our window, in the three-story buildings, immense buildings, I have no pictures of it, I could see people were saying, Capri. It was the Isle of Capri. But I could see there was a bit of a light hole. It's that cave through it. Now I know, but then I didn't. Some of our people went to Pompeii. They obviously paid money. They had, of course, some money on them, probably converted to lira, I don't know. But they were taken to the harbour, and we boarded the ship Fair Sea, which eventually was a Sitmar line. She had two sister ships, Fair Sky and Fair Star. Anyway, this was Fair Sea, which during the war was an American aircraft carrier. And then it belonged to a Russian immigrant who was pretty loaded, I suppose, living in Argentina. His name was Vlasov, V-L-I-S-O-V. Anyway, and he rented it to the IRO. So we boarded the ship. I have a picture of the ship, and us, my brother and I and my father, at the bow, standing there, the day we left. or maybe the day before. But anyway, so we pulled off. The crew was Italian, the captain was Italian, so the rotund man, I have a picture of him. And so we took the route through Red Sea, Suez Canal, Red Sea, and then straight across the Indian Ocean, and we stopped at Fremantle. Apparently, the captain was told not to follow the other route, the north of Australia there, but go through go and stop at Fremantle. So basically, in colloquial English, he told them to go and jump in the lake. And I said, "Hoi, hoi, what's this all about? Listen, you do as you're told or you got no job." I have some excerpt of the copies, rather, of the Hansard from Canberra. Anyway, however, we then stopped at Fremantle. And the reason for doing that, for being him, or went through Zurich and something in Denmark, he was ordered, do it. He had to pay £58 berthing fee. It's just for the day, because the Right Honourable Arthur Caldwell, the Minister for Immigration, who coined the phrase in a speech in Victoria on the 8th of August of that year, we shall now call these men New Australians, these people, New Australians. Anyway, the term coined and was used for 50 years. However, so we stopped, is because he came all the way from Canberra to present a teddy bear and a football, give a peck to a 7-year-old girl and her brother, 5-year-old. He's now an eminent oncologist in Sydney, and a certificate. She was Latvian, Kalnins, the surname, and it was filmed. I have photos of that, well, copies anyway, and because she was the 50,000th New Australian. But then I got the Hansard copy, what the government, the Liberal government, how they tore into poor old Arthur. They nearly skinned him for this, because the whole procedure cost £1,000. No, anyway. And then we, around the thing, we came to Newcastle. I haven't...
so from Fremantle you came underneath?
Yes, to Newcastle.
Wow.
Lee Wharf. And what time we arrived, it was, I believe, about 6:30. But there was a mention of the shipping, the times, arrivals, etc.
Yeah.
However,
wow.
I woke up, we had...
How long did the journey take from...
28 days.
28 days, from Italy to...
Yeah, I know the date. When we left there, I can't remember. I have downstairs. What I have downstairs is amazing. Even I am amazed. Records going back to Germany and to the old country, my father's.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we stopped. Then I wake up. My men and women were segregated on the trip. I wake up. My brother wasn't there. And my father went there. So I got up and I went up on the deck.
So everyone was segregated, even your mother and father?
Yes, men and women aboard the ship. During the night, or during the day,
everyone was mixed.
Complete. But when the ship entered the Red Sea, it was so hot that, Suez Canal, I don't know, the deck was so hot that if you stepped on it, and some people did, and they burned themselves. So they put tarps on there to prevent that happening. There were 1,896 of us. And aboard was a countess. By the way, she opened with her husband Elcron, the restaurant.
Oh, yeah.
She was there. We won't go into that.
So what was the name of the lady that ran the Alcron? for the day, but we
Of course.
loved it. Very, very bohemian
Yes,
sort of a
of
place.
course, of course. It's the first restaurant in Newcastle.
Ah,
There was no. There were two restaurants: the Great Eastern
yeah.
and the and Chung Hing. That's all.
That's it.
There were no others. Coffee? No. Well, what's coffee? And that's in Newcastle. Yeah, I'm talking about early 50s.
Yeah. So this were your first impressions getting off the ship in 1949
Yes,
at Lee Wharf.
yes.
What did you see?
Outside
what
that-
made you impressions? What were your
Outside
impressions?
that big building, which was a shed, which is still there, became Maritime Centre,
Yeah.
not anymore. By the way, I know Peter Morris very well, personally, anyway. He's Greek, by the way. You know that.
No.
No, he's Greek. His father jumped the ship of a
What's his real name?
broom. I don't know.
It wouldn't be
Probably
Morris.
Philippos, yeah, or whatever, something like that. Anyway, but the thing is, nobody wanted to eat. They were all too excited. I went on the back and I saw some people leaning, looking at our ship. You've seen pictures of the ship, of
On the
the
news.
berth there. You have all that. Leaning on the barrier, the civic gates there, staring at us. But anyway, we then came down into that in queues marked A to J and then K to whatever. You stood and had to identify yourself. There was a tag. I didn't have a tag, but obviously my parents had, and you were ticked off. And then you then went and boarded a train. The ones with just the small cabins, about 8 or 10 people.
Yeah.
You couldn't go to the next cabin. And we went on a siding there, just south of the building.
Yeah.
And then there was a shuttle service of these trains. Choof, 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 choof. We went through to Greta and stopped Greta Station and the siding there. Now, I remember traveling and there were swamps there. Sandgate, Hexham. I saw these swamps. I couldn't explain why there were swamps. We, as kids, certainly, we somehow got the idea because we overheard adults talking. Somebody from Australia who came here already wrote to his friends in Germany and said, the place is swarming with snakes and poisonous spiders, so much so that this guy apparently was working at a farm somewhere, and they all had to organize themselves into some kind of line to beat these snakes away, so frighten them or whatever, I don't know. So I had that fear. So when we arrived at Greta Camp, for the next year, certainly, whenever I went to the bush, and we had the biggest playground in Australia. There were no fences around the Great Northern, the Northern Railway there at the Endell Creek. No, anyway, up Mount Molly Morgan, good old Molly Morgan. Of course, you know about her well.
Yeah.
Anyway, Baba, she was greater than she made out. She did not harbor bushrangers. No, it's invention. However, I was always cautious and looking for any spiders or snakes. Never saw one. We were there for 1 year and we left in January 51. We arrived August, so that's whatever. And I saw in 1951, in May, we went by train to Sydney, Puffing Billy, went by ferry to the Taronga Park with a friend who was living in Fairfield. He had been with us in a camp in Germany. I have a picture of the time. Yeah. And I only saw for the first time the snakes there, behind glass, at Taronga Park. And spiders, some kind of things. I had been once, after the war, with my parents to the Munich zoo, yes, and I saw the monkeys for the first time in my life, etc. Now back to the, so we got there, we arrived with the train loads of us left at about 11 a.m.
So there's no one else at Greta Migrant Camp? You were the first arrivals?
No.
Yeah.
Before we arrived there were about 150 or 200 New Australians who arrived in Sydney on another ship,
Yeah.
and they were taken to Bathurst,
Okay.
the camp Bathurst, where my son lives with his family. And they were there for about 2 weeks, and they were, because they were crowded maybe or something, they were then taken by train and came to Greta Camp. And one reason for bringing them there, one of the reasons was because there was grass this tall between the huts, because the army had left, of course. There were still maybe 5 or 6 army men there, but nothing. And they were supposed to chop that down, not with mowers, but with some kind of cutters, which they didn't do. So they were there. And then, when we already were there, 80 or 82 Russians from China, they came from an island called Tubabao in Philippines, where they were kept. There were 5,500 of them. They were all former citizens of Shanghai, the big city of Shanghai. They were all those who came to China after the revolution. Anyway, the 80 of them came, and then eventually they all spread out. Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, etc., etc. So I suddenly met Russians for the first time since, 1941 or something. Anyway, so they took us at the Greta station siding. There were scores of buses, all kinds, short, long, even one double-decker one, not the green one, but another color. Yeah. They were gathered by the government from all over the valley to convey us to the camp, which was about 40 kilometers
1,896 of you.
Sorry?
1,896 of you.
Yes, yeah, of us. But there were others. There were a couple of immigration officials and maybe, but I'm not counting them. Mm-hmm. And we were there, and then we were then allotted the huts. And these huts were through huts, army. And men and women were segregated. No. There were only 2 of those.
Okay.
It's later, after they started building these. And one of the companies which built the camp, initially in 1939, and then also these, when we were there, F.H. Compton's, the building company, who at one time there were Eastmason then, there were 4 companies involved. The Comptons, they had their office over here in Sandgate, opposite the Maximilian Kolbe house. I knew one of their managers. However, we went to this one, every 4 blocks. I'll give you the map that I made. Yeah. It's an A4. I also built a model which is kept in the museum. It's about 3.7 meters long, and about 2.5 meters in 4 sections. To scale, everything. There were 526 individual buildings in the camp. At one time, during the war, there were about almost 8,000 soldiers there.
How long did you reside at the camp?
Well, we left there on about 22nd or 23rd or 24th of January 1951. Okay. But anyway, I went to Mountain Boys High. I was 2 years older than other kids there. The headmaster there was that eminent pedagogue, Russell F. Hodge, a former Gallipoli veteran. What a wonderful man. He wrote when I enrolled there, they enrolled us there. We had to go by bus to the station, Greta station, then by train, then walk to the school and repeat the procedure. But other kids went to the Morris Brothers, the Mason Girls High, and some other Catholic school there. Anyway, but the thing is that we had the authorities in the school realized, how can we put these kids amongst our kids, let's say 1A or 1B or 1C, this
You
good
couldn't
old.
understand the language.
No! So they put us in a class, eventually the second was formed, they called it 1NA for New Australians.
Okay.
So 1NA was, my teacher there was Mr. Cusick. What his first name I don't know. He was a heavy smoker. During the school, during the lectures, lessons, he would be smoking. So much so, his fingers, he were brown. Through. Short guy. Anyway, I have pictures of it. I have the school magazine of the time. Anyway,
So this is during your time at Greta or after?
oh, we were still Greta.
Okay.
Oh, because we travelled there.
So what are your impressions of being there
In Greta camp.
as a young
Well,
young boy, basically?
well, those we would have considered other boys.
You were 14. 14?
Yes, I turned 15 in December.
Yeah, you were born in 35 and
Yeah.
turned 15 in
Yes.
1950.
Anyway, but the thing is that they're called 1NA, and there was subscript 1NA1, and the other class was 1NA2. The other class was run by Dave Morland, who was a member of servicemen. Apparently, he was. Alex Shurha can tell you all about him. You have to get through to Alex Shurha, you know.
Did you?
He's
you
running
had,
the book.
You
yeah.
had English lessons?
No.
None?
No.
So what did they teach you?
Oh, well, so here, well, they gave us...
Who was teaching you? What would they?
Oh,
what were they teaching
No,
you?
well,
effectively?
there was no English.
Yeah.
While we were in the camp school, I was... my first teacher, Australian, was Alphonse O'Neill.
This was camp. This was
at the camp.
a school in the camp.
Sixth class.
Okay.
Sixth class.
Yeah.
I was...
You were
yeah.
all in the same class.
Yes, well, not all. There are many households there, whatever. And he taught us some English.
Okay.
But the most difficult thing is for us to took one page in exercise book we had to learn about pounds, shillings, and pence,
Yeah.
and learn how to multiply them. So you had 17 pounds L as 11 shillings and 7 pence.
Yeah.
And you had to multiply by 17. Can you imagine if it took this? But then we went into the British system
Yeah.
from metric, so we had to learn all that. He was very good.
How did you find it all become metric?
Oh, the hectares, the acres became hectares.
So what were your parents doing in the camp?
Well,
what
my
was
mother
life
worked
like
in
for
the
them?
kitchen. My mother
Okay.
was a kitchen employee.
Yeah.
And my father, during the day, didn't do anything. During the night, he was a night watchman.
Okay.
But
So
when we
finally
came
got-
here to Newcastle, he, because he did not speak English, he just never picked English, just a few words here. I was his English interpreter everywhere, in all circumstances. His first job was, fortunately, only 3 weeks as a council, Newcastle Council road digger, digging trenches that didn't have excavator. They used shovels. This is 1951. Then after that, he went, and he was for about 5 months at the state dockyard, floating dock. He had to start work at 5:30 in the morning. But anyway, the first time he went there, I had to go with him to interpret for him, and then he was scraping barnacles on there, and at the same time he was still tending to any of the Orthodox people. Gratis, as I already said. That's the unique nature. I'm very uncommon, I would imagine. And then after that he went to Ganinas for 11 months, and he was patent painter. Patents, you know, for casting. And then after 11 months, he and another gentleman, Bill Thornton here, who by the way became good friends of ours, he used to come and visit us in Thomas Street, who told us, and my parents I interpreted, there were 36 pubs in Wall's End early in the 20th century and end of 19th century. 36 pubs. Now, I know one pub is now a house. Anyway, over there in Brown Street. no, sorry, Campbell Street. But anyway, so my father then went to BHP, and he was working on the wharf, greasing the joints, the rail tracks on the wharf there, and the oil bridge there, and then after a while he was put into direct metal foundry change house, DM foundry. There was steel foundry and direct metal foundry, and he was on his ticket. It said change house attendant. But what he did, he was washing toilets and showers, etc. And he was happy. He was happy. He didn't complain at all. He was grateful to a force higher than you and I. Much higher, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right? Okay, now the other thing is then he retired, he was about to retire, and Mr. Felton, I think his name was Bill, I was working at the research labs from 1964 till I retired in 1997. Anyway, he rang me there and said, your dad is retiring, and he named, I think it was Tuesday or the following week. Could you come here and interpret for him as the boys, he might want to say something to the boys. That's the foundry.
And what year was this?
This is now, when he was 65. So 71.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
Yeah,
I
so
think
he retired in 71.
I think my daughter had just been born, Lara, my daughter, which the correct name is Larissa, of course. So I came, I said yes.
And where did he retire from? He retired
Oh,
from
BHP.
BHP.
Still works here. At one time, there were 12,800 employees at BHP here. That was only for about a year and a half or 2 years. 12,800. By comparison, AIS, Australian Iron and Steel, the BHP over there, Wollongong, had 27,000. We initially, when I started, we had 3 blast furnaces. And then I was involved in the design. It was building the 4th blast furnace. The 4th.
So you get your education at what school did you go to?
Oh, well, I went to Myton High.
Yeah.
Then when we moved here, I went to the oldest school in Australia. Do you know what that school is?
That's at,
Good old Newcastle Junior Boys High up on the hill,
Yeah.
which was established in 1816. And when we commemorated this occasion, Justice Michael Kirby came, and Junior Giller.
Yeah.
Anyway, I was prefect there in my final year, 52.
52.
I got a badge somewhere. There were 12 prefects. And anyway, but the thing is, so I went there, and then, of course, out of 84 boys in the intermediate, who finished intermediate, 3rd year, only I and my brother John went further on to do living at Boys High. And the headmaster was F.H. Beard, that eminent pedagogue. But at Boys High, predecessing me was none other than the athlete, the one who was Olympic president. His father, Gosper, Kevin Gosper.
Yeah.
His father was a
He was
counselor.
at Newcastle Teachers College too.
Yeah, all right. And he came once. Anyway,
So you have your leaving certificate?
I had it there, yeah.
Okay.
And I can name you. I have 3 magazines called Novocastrian pertaining to Boys High, and one 1950 pertaining to Maitland Boys High.
So you enter the industries after
Yes,
that?
I entered.
So
but
what was your-
initially, I was trying to decide which part of engineering to do.
Yeah.
And mind you, I was older than normal kids at a leaving certificate age by 2 years. By the way, in my year at Boys High,
So what year is this? This is
55.
1950.
Sadly, because I failed maths, Mr. Beard called me and said, okay, you've passed basically, but if you are intending, as we know, to do engineering, I would certainly recommend that you repeat So I became 1 year even older. I was very self-conscious of that. But at Boys High, in my year, was fourth and fifth year, was Brian Sitters, whom I know very well. You know. However, so we that was it. But so I came to the guys in the metal foundry dining room were eating, and the whistle blew, and they all came out. These big fellows, you know. They shook my hand and my father, big hands. My hand just disappeared. You know, they're still working. I mean, they're big guys with aprons, and they, well, certainly three of them would have said to me, "Tell your dad he's the best man we ever met." See, emotion. But
Sorry.
okay, and so my father, he established in a hut in Block Q, Hut 8, the church there, which was attended by even the Catholics, although there was a Catholic chapel, St. Anthony's. The priest there was Father John Lavery, you know about him.
They like your father better than their own priests, mate.
Of course. But the thing is, the Catholic camp and the various other Orthodox, the Ukrainians, the Poles, the Belarusians, the Macedonians, the Serbs, you name it. So we were there, and then in 1955, they closed the Silver City, where this was, excuse me, and only Chocolate City was being kept. So we had to move the church to Chocolate City, and but I kept going there. When the
what was this? The Silver City? What is Silver City?
Silver City is because the huts there
Yeah.
were made of galvanized iron.
Okay. So it would have
the
been
roof
very
was
hot in summer.
Very hot. But when we arrived, these huts in Chocolate City, they were through huts. The bunks, and men, women,
So what are
segregated.
these cities? Are these names of the...
No, the name of
No,
Silver
nicknames
City
of-
is derived from the fact that it looked like silver, you know, galvanized
Silver
iron.
City.
The Chocolate City is
What's a
because
chocolate city?
fiber,
Fiber.
and they're
Okay.
painted chocolatey color.
Okay.
Brown.
How many of these cities were there?
There were just two.
Just two.
Yeah.
Chocolate City.
Look, I'll have to give you the map.
Okay. Okay.
Would you like me to?
Yeah.
I'll have to give you something
Yeah.
to supplement all this.
Yeah. Okay.
But I do have downstairs
Well,
in the
this will
garage
help, I guess.
one of the suitcases, wooden suitcases that came with us. Yes,
You have.
made in Germany
Okay.
by my father
Mhm.
after the war.
Mhm.
It's unfortunately, it's many years ago, well, about 1953, my mother painted it
Mhm.
green because it was so yucky.
Yeah.
It's about this long.
How are you
This
going?
thing-
Do you want...
But by the way, here I have to mention my father was a clergyman of the Orthodox Church from 1934 until he died here in Newcastle in 1977. Now, but that's another matter that I could come in. He was a unique individual. Now I know. Actually, when I recall him, I sometimes go into tears. No wonder. I mean, he in Newcastle, the various people have met me. He said, "I knew your dad." I said, "Why?" "Because I'm Macedonian," and he was such a nice man. However, to make it short, the Catholic Church in their home at Sengate, the nursing home or whatever, when they built the Maximilian Kolbe home, it was intended for partly ethnics and Australians. They wrote to me and asked me to send, if I consent, the secretary there, data on my father and a suitable photograph. I decided, yes, okay. And so when they finished that home, I attended this opening with Bishop And and they named that room the lounge room in his name. That's how he was regarded. But in addition to that, why he was probably so outstanding is that he never ever accepted any remunerary assistance or some kind of payment or remuneration or whatever from the parish that he established at Greta Camp, the big Greta Camp, which saw 100,000 of us migrants, New Australians, go through it over the 10-year life from 1949 till 16th of December 1960. I have, by the way, contributed to a book on that camp, which was the biggest army camp in Australia from 1939 on until the end of the war. And then from 1949, a migrant holding center, it was called. In that sense, it was the second biggest in Australia. The biggest was Bunagilla, just near Albury, down south. And so back to my father briefly, I'm absolutely amazed what a wonderful man he was. I will not go into thousands of details, but he did not accept. So much so, but he had to live off something. He had to support family. Me, my brother John, who lives in Sydney, and his wife. So, in Greta Camp, he worked as a night watchman. There were 2 canteens, army canteens, and so at night, to prevent somebody breaking in and pilfering things, I suppose, there was a night watchman. And so that was my father's job. But in addition to that, he still served the needs of the church, the various needs as pertaining to church. Of course,
this was the Russian Orthodox Church.
It was essentially Russian Orthodox. But in Greta Camp, we had 18 different nationalities. 18. And when we speak about the Orthodox Church, we are talking about the Eastern Orthodox part of Christianity until 1054. There was one big happy family. But then in 1054, there was a big break. It's called the Big Schism. They separated. They have never rejoined.
So your father's name was John?
John. And German Johann, but...
so do you want to put a bit of biographical detail to your parent?
Yes, okay. Now we're married in 1933. I was born, he was ordained in 34. Now, in the Eastern Orthodox Church, you don't have to be celibate. You can. Nobody stops you from being celibate, unmarried. But once you become a monastic, in other words, a monk, then you cannot marry. If you want to marry, then you have to leave the monastic life or whatever. Back in the old country, when a guy was going to marry a lady, they went and there was a luncheon, and they sat at the luncheon, they talked, and they had a good feast, etc. My father's, he had 3 brothers. One died, Andrew, he died just after World War I. But my father's youngest brother came to my mother's parents' place for this thing, this initiation, and then arrangements was made when they would get married, etc., etc., etc. Maybe there's even a dowry of some kind, I don't know. And my mother saw my father, instead of going for his youngest brother, she went for him. And that's the way it happened. But my father was a very handsome man. And all his life he had a little mole here, which was dark, black. And then there are photos, of course. Many. And he had a very, very good tenor. So that attracted some ladies, as I have found out, wherever he conducted, was involved in conducting a mass, as some people call it, or liturgy in the Orthodox terminology. There would be a congregation of ladies from the neighboring village. This is a fact. Anyway, so they married in 1933. My father, of course, finished his theological studies at a seminary in a city called Pinsk, which spelled P-I-N-S-K in Belarus, and that city is 49 years older in founding than Moscow. Moscow was founded in 1147. That town was 49 years before. Anyway, there was the theological college there, and he finished that, etc. And they were married, and etc.
So is that where he was born, or
no? He was born in a place called Borodichi, a village, of course. His parents had a big farm, and so did my other grandparents. They also had big farms, but my other grandfather, my mother's father, he had 100, as I recall, 100 beehives. So he had apiary, and he was
big.
Yes, big. And but during the World War I, both of them, my father's parents and my mother's parents, they moved to Russia to escape the Austro-Hungarian military events that occurred there. There were battles there nearby, so they went for safety. And so they lived in the southern part of Russia then. Well, Ukraine. One particular city is there, still there, I know, called Makeyevka, and I've seen it in the papers mentioned. But my mother's father was working there in the steel plant, and during the World War I, and there was an accident where a steel ladle, fell, and he was, of course, nearby. He lost part of his leg, and then but his other friend was killed. There were two of them or three, maybe, I don't know. But as I remember, he was such a good handyman. He actually, and I saw him, he apparently constructed an orthopedic leg. And I do remember that in order for him to fold it, he had a cord in his trousers into the pocket. And I remember him pulling it to fold, to bend his knee, etc. There, my mother's village was called Tolkovo. The town where I eventually moved from the village, I was given the present by my children, a son and a daughter. A daughter was born in February 1971, and her brother, in March 1975. Anyway, they both are married with children, but that gave me a photo of that town, not a photo, I mean, a picture, which gives the name, and the night sky on the night I was born. I have it in the bedroom there. It's amazing. And the latitude and longitude to 3 decimal points. I have never seen that done.
So your parents came from different towns?
Yes.
Were they close by, these
they're
towns?
probably about 14 kilometers.
And then
yeah. Well, in 1953, during the school holidays, I got a job at Ron Bauer's garage in Maitland Road, Mayfield, and the mechanics there, I was introduced to everyone. The guy, I was in the office there, doing some invoice markings, etc. There were no computers then or anything. And the guy in charge of the office, there's only he, and I was sort of there, his name was Kevin Buxton. he became the commodore of the 16-footer things on the lake, Kevin Buxton. Very nice. He always treated me well, etc. That was later, but he was involved in yachting. His picture's over there in the club somewhere. I've seen it. Anyway, one of the guys came up to me one day and said, "Can we call you Vit instead of Vitaly?" I said, "Sure, go on." And so that went on around, and so they called me Vic instead of Vit. What's Vit? It's something you put on the toast or something. Anyway, and that's how it became Victor. And so many people call me Victor. None of the migrant people call me. Ethnic people call me Victor. Well, except individuals. I'm a life member of the ethnic communities, the FACA, whatever you call it, Federation of Ethnic Communities of Australia and all that. I'm a life member here, etc. I was one of the first in a small group of ethnic sort of people, in all but 9 or 10 of us, who met in all kinds of cubby holes here in the backs of pubs and everywhere in the Hunter Street and elsewhere, to ask the government to give these ethnic people residing in Newcastle some kind of home. The net result later, much later, was the now called Northern Settlement Services in Bridge Street, Hamilton, where my wife has worked for over 26 years. Anyway, still does. They've asked her to help them, although she's retired. That I remember that building in 1950. It was just windowless, with a building with one door. It was a warehouse. Eventually, much later, it became a glove-making factory where women were working. They call it something Windsor glove, something WINSOR or something. But before that, it also was a different type. Oh yeah, Claude neon signs were there. So now they've done it up and it's there and etc. But for me to go to do the architecture, there was no university here. There were about 38, I think, from memory.
This is 55?
This is 55.
Yes. So the University College was established in 51?
But the students were part of the University of New South Wales.
Yeah.
There were only about 35 or 38.
Yeah.
Including one of our section leaders at the research labs,
Yeah.
Brian. Anyway, but I couldn't do anything at that time. So I actually got a job at Comsteel in 1955. I was there for 6 weeks in an office called Dressing Shop. That's next to where they were grinding these big grinders, these wheels, the rims of these railway wheels, big ones. Anyway, and then I left them and I then went to Rylands for some more weeks in an office there. And then after that I went in 1956, I went to Stuart & Lloyd's and I was there for 11 months. And I was given that job as a temporary thing. They said, yes, when they found out my story, yes, you can work. And I worked in a place called Socket Shop. And there were some ethnics working there. There were some Italian names there. And I was just general doing marking who was AWL, absent without annual, actually official, OL or whatever, etc. Just general clerical. And then down below, the office was upstairs. Down below where was the blacksmith shop. It had all these hydraulic hammers. Some of them.
Where was your family living at this time?
Oh, we were living at Thomas Street, number 26. We bought that cottage.
Thomas Street.
Wallsend.
Wallsend, okay.
We bought that cottage. My parents still
Was that the
agreed.
first property
Yes.
that you had?
In 1950, for £400, the real estate agent was Mr. Bell at Islington. It doesn't exist anymore. They were paying off this house. It was a house, a miner's cottage. The back portion of the building, of course wooden, was hewn slab hut. So it wasn't sawn, it was hewn. The front was added, but the original part, the back part, was built in 1871. Well, that's according to the deeds that I still remember. The thing is that my mother she was a very unusual woman. She could do anything. She painted the roof. She built the trestles, everything. She built the paths, concrete paths. There was a big garden in the back. The block is still empty. Anyway, in 1958, 59, we embarked on building a house. So that building, it had to be built a certain distance away from the frontage of Thomas Street, because they were going to widen it, which they did. So we had to build it further in. But my mother used to grow veggies when we were still at Greta. She planted, and she would she would come here, stay the night or 2 nights here. She left her job at the kitchen there, and she would go by bus to Steel Street, where the markets were, and would sell the few little odd bits and pieces for a few shillings, and then come home. And I would come, and sometimes my brother would come and stay the night, so we could, from Greta by train, we could water the garden. So anyway, there were 2 picture theatres in Nelson Fair, Empire and the Phelan's. Phelan's was the older one. That interior that we had columns, just timber. That's how old it was. However, back to this, and so I went, and I got a job at C.A. Bergman's, and I was there for 2 years, in Maryville, near the pub, behind the pub. What's that? Bell Street, I think they call it. The guy who owned that, he established it during the war, was Clive Bergman, who was the brother of the Anglican bishop of Canberra Goulburn.
Was he known as the Red Bishop?
Sorry?
He was known as the Red Bishop.
I don't know, but one day I was doing a bit of simple turning, all kinds of stuff.
Trying to run away from communists.
Yes. But there was also one like that in England too, the Red whatever. But in there, I was there for 2 years, and I used to do all kinds of general things. I was classed as 3rd grade machinist. The things I did, I used to turn out these pennies, they were called, the cast iron. They were the holders where the bearings went for conveyor belts. I did billions of them. But you had to be careful, you had to feel anyway, there was a gauge and you had to stick to the check. However, from there I went straight. One day, I went to BHP, saw Mr. Ken Wilson there. He was the guy in charge of the design department. And he spoke to me and said, come back again next week. And I came back, and he put me onto his assistant, Ron Mainprice, who was an Anglican lay preacher. I didn't know that at the time. And this would have been end of 1958, somewhere. And on 27th of January 1959, I got the job. They said, come here, you start on Monday. And I was there in a drawing office, a design department. I couldn't see a single drafting machine board there. They were all flat things. like they were when they were designing Titanic in the Holland and whatever, Asian, whatever, in Belfast.
Yeah.
I've seen the documentaries of it. Flat, T-square, Z-squares. Then finally 2 drawing boards appeared, the hydraulic one. 2. You can turn around, you can lower it, and there was the scale or whatever, the machine. I didn't have any such. Then in 1960, I did start doing engineering. I started doing in 1957, halfway through at here, Tice Hill, but the mechanical. But in 1960, BHP, because they were going to build a new building near the gates, the big one, they put a number of us, about 14 of us, they rented the 4th floor in Bolton Street NMLA building, NMLA, opposite the Herald office, on the 4th floor. There was nothing there, and I and my colleagues, we had to bring in these desks and bring in these drafting machines. The desks were big, very good, but heavy, from Andrew Cook of Union Street, I think they were there. And so I was there for about 2.5 years, and suddenly the supervisor there went around saying, any of you guys want to go to research labs at Shorten for 6 months? Nobody wanted. Because I was so close to this, would save me driving. I said, yeah. So Fred Menzies was the guy, then after him we were on here. And so I said yes. So on Monday, I drove up in my VW, CMR 320, Biddleback, to there, and I reported there, and that's it. Then the 6 months were up, and the other people rang and said, where's the guy? We want him back. But the Dr. Hosking, who was in charge here, with Barry Lyon, Dr. Lyon next to his assistant, they said, no, can we keep him for another 2 months? So they did. And then I went back, not to Bolton Street, but back to where I started in Port Waratah, on the top floor there in the administration building, and the northeast part of it. And so I went there, and then the research people rang and said, could we have this guy back again? So I got back to the research labs after about 4 months there, and no questions were asked, but one day the secretary of Dr. Barry Lyon, the assistant director then, he called me to his office and said, would you like to stay here? I said, oh, thank you, but can I have a bit of a think over the weekend? So I came back on Monday, went in, secretary, Miss Gregory got me in his office. He was called by other guys Baza, but interesting. But he was a graduate of that university in Paris.
Sorbonne.
Sorbonne, that's it. In metal physics of some kind. Anyway, I said, yes, I will, okay, I will stay. He got off his desk, big desk, came around, shook my hand, he said, good. And that was the end of it. And I was there till February 1997.
Wow.
But the first time when I called there, Brian Henry was there. He was the husband of Margaret Henry.
Ah.
He was the man. But I was the only person that could do anything. There was a drawing board there. Yeah. There was no one else. In fact, what's his first name? Jenkins was there before me for a few months. He was going to overseas. That's why they asked me to go there. He asked me, well, look, you from the drawing office, we ain't got no such thing here. You do it. You organize. And which I did. I set up new system, procedures, the numbers, all the paraphernalia and so on, and that's it. So, But Brian Henry left us. He went to university, but eventually he separated from Margaret. I knew Margaret. I've sat next to her in functions at the City Hall and elsewhere. But anyway, so I was there, and I'm now a retired person, but I am a subdeacon in the Orthodox Church, which means I'm not a clergyman. Well, I'm not a priest.
Yeah.
I mean, I read the old Slavonic, which is used in the Russian Orthodox Church. But then when we arrived here, of course, in '51, my mother went on a look-see through Nelson Street, and she saw this real estate agent, Tom Bishop. We got to know him well. And she called in, and somehow she made herself understood that they were looking for a house which could be converted into a church, a chapel, whatever you want to call it. And he took her around to Irving Street over here, number 3. There was a dilapidated old building, probably built just before World War I, weatherboard, and it was for sale because the guy, Mr. Ford, who owned it, wasn't living there. He was living in another house next to there, in Cowper Street, next to his bakery. He was a baker. But he had been betting heavily, and he came into some debt. So he was selling this. And for £519, we bought it. We had to conduct sort of entertainment evenings or dances at YMCA in King Street, at the St. James Church of England Hall in Wickham, in Hemel Street, all kinds of things. And we were able to scrape enough to pay it off. But then in 1962, I came on the scene. My father was still alive. It was a decision to build a church. Throw this away, and we built. I designed this church now in number 3. You're welcome to see it. I can open it for you. And then it took us 2 years, just the men in the family, not a single tradesman amongst us. That's what these wogs, crowds, or dagoes, or whatever you want to call them, New Australians, are capable of. Yes. One of them, built his own place at Edgeworth, brick one. He's still there. His wife lives there. He's now deceased. He worked at Steel Foundry in BHP. Anyway, and these guys, we did it by ourselves. Of course, I had to submit to the council. There were steel frames there, etc. You had to submit calculations.
So you built the church?
We built it ourselves. Yeah. But one thing that, of course, had to be bought is the rounded windows that were ordered with the cabinet, with the carpentry people. We couldn't do it. Yeah. Well, I mean, that, and also the 2 cupolas, onion-shaped, you can have a look at they were made at Edgeworth by some guy. It's fiberglass. But we had to make a form for it. And the form of one of them is quite big. The timber for the forms, I've got pictures to show you how it's being made. Yeah. I took it. We got at the Lorna Street dump, there were these big spools for the cables, made of pine, I think. We got split them up and cut up the framework for it. And then sent it there, and they built it for us. But I've got pictures, guys, and I, up on climbing everywhere. And not a single, from February 62 when we dug the footings, I have pictures of it. And then till the day it was opened by the Archbishop from Sydney in 1964 in August. We invited for the laying of the foundation corner bit the former Mayor Alderman Frank Purdue, and then for the opening, him again and his wife. I have pictures of it. But the thing is, talking about Purdue, he his niece, I think it was, Pauline Pauline McGuigan. Oh no, she related to McGuigan family.
Yeah.
But no, she lived next door when she was boarding in Mayfield, Rose Street, Mayfield,
Yep.
next to the Purges.
Town.
I took her once. I was in those days from 1964. I was for 7.5 years member of the Conservatorium choir. At the same time, I was member of Newcastle City Choir. At the same time, I was member of the Choral Society, but only 2 years up on the hill there, under Keith Noak, the organist there.
Yes.
Now deceased, of course. Now the P guy there is good. He's our accompanist. And then also from about July till the end of the year, I would travel all the way from Thomas Street to Cornwall to sing their oratorio.
So where did the singing come from?
Where?
Yeah.
Well, I've been singing since 1944 when we arrived in Germany.
Okay.
When I say singing, I don't mean in a shower or in a toilet. No,
Yeah.
no. I mean in a group.
Yeah.
In a group.
So you loved singing?
Of course.
Your father was a singer?
I'm a
too?
baritone.
Okay.
Oh, he had beautiful tenor.
Yeah.
Oh yes. Oh yes.
So where did the musical element of your family come
I don't
from?
know.
You don't
I remember from very early age, my mother would sing as she was doing things back in the old country, back in the village,
Yeah.
and when we were in town, and I would sing with her.
Mm-hmm.
I
And you
just-
continued singing your
Yeah,
entire life.
yeah.
Your father retired in 71, and
Yes.
his retirement years, what are your impressions of him after retirement?
But actually,
Both your parents.
after he retired, the church council, the regular meetings, of course, they suggested that they give him something for everything he's been doing. He did not take any monetary gift after weddings and the christenings, but he did take it from funerals because that was the law. The officiating person, the celebrant, whatever you want to call him, had to be so. But anyway, back to my father. He then agreed when they decided to. There's only one collection made, only on a Sunday morning service, never in the evening service or night or just one collection in the morning. Well, if the service some kind of church feast day or whatever, then, but always in the morning. And that used to go in the bank. So when we started building the church here, there were 1,116, please believe me, because I was involved, pounds in the Commonwealth Bank here in Walsall, Nelson Street, Walsall. Now you don't start building anything with that kind of money. It's just ridiculous. I mean, you're going to build. But many of our men, only men that would finish their shift at BHP or at Stewart's and Lloyd, that would come by bus. Many of them didn't have a car. They would come by bus and go and work there on their own, unsupervised.
Yeah.
But in all that time, there had never been one accident, and we were up climbing up there. I had to paint all those what I call rigid frames.
So the church is still in location in Wallsend,
Yes,
and it's still being used?
of course.
Yeah.
Of course. And our current priest, so to speak, is Father James. He is an Australian, ex-Anglican, who some years ago, I don't know, I can look it up, he espoused the Orthodoxy. But further in the piece, there was a Professor David Frost at uni. You remember him? The classics.
I don't remember him, but I've heard of him. Yeah.
Tall Englishman. He was on secondment here from England, and his wife Magda, she was Indian. But he was the top Anglican in Newcastle diocese. He was involved in that committee that revised their prayer book, their whatever they call it, which had not been revised for donkey's years, since probably Henry VIII, whatever. But the thing is that he became Orthodox. And the guy who did the honor of converting him, as the common term is, was Archbishop Gibran of the Antiochian Church in Sydney. And his wife also became. Now, I am told that back in England, their children have also been baptized. But there's one guy in England there, he's still alive and well. He was a journalist, no, he was a writer, a historian, and all kinds of, Timothy Ware. And he became Orthodox, and he is now Archbishop Timothy Ware. Another guy who became Orthodox is not John Tavener, the old one in the 16th century. No. It's the modern one who died of that.
In 1998.
He died in 1999. Did he?
Yeah, John Turner, the historian.
Yeah.
In Newcastle. He became Orthodox too.
Of course.
Wow. That's a surprise.
Well, anyway. But there are, in Africa, there are several million of the darkies there who do this funny dancing, who are Orthodox too. There are 16 different Orthodox churches, meaning the only difference is the language. They speak, or they do their services, so to speak, in their language. So you see over there in Africa, Eastern Africa mostly, the completely dark guy who is wearing the gear that the Greek bishop in Greece is wearing, and he's wearing the same, except he's got permanent suntan.
So when did your father pass away? What year?
He died on 22nd of November 1977.
Okay.
To his funeral came here, of course, the Archbishop, of course, with several clergy, but his pallbearers, where they wanted, and they went around the church, and then, of course, where these following people, all clergymen, I've got photos. One was Archdeacon Bill Childs from Cessnock. The other guy, and you know all about it, it was not known, Peter Rushton, who he went to Boys High. I knew him. He was here, rector here. Anyway, he knew us. I knew him very well. The other was Philip Thirlwell, who is still alive and well, but not Peter. Of course, he died. You know the story what happened there.
No.
No, you don't. Oh, you know this pedophilia business. All
Oh, yes.
that
Peter.
the commission. What's the
Child Abuse Royal Commission.
yes, the lady,
Rushton's,
the writer,
yeah.
what's her name? McRae, is it? No.
I don't know.
The Herald writer.
Oh, McCarthy. Joanne McCarthy.
Yes, she will
Exposed.
initiate the whole proceedings, essentially.
Yeah.
And the other was a Macedonian priest, and one was Serbian priest. I think perhaps that illustrates something.
The respect among the
Exactly.
various clergy.
But back to this. So he died on 22nd of November, 77. The thing is that that's the date on which John F. Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas. Not the same year.
No.
His year was 1963.
Your mother. How did your mother
Well,
go?
my mother was quite a remarkable woman, very hardworking. So she complemented my father's meager salary through her garden, as I already said.
Yeah.
And she would take a bunch of radishes to the pay shilling or 1 6 threepence, then 1 threepence back.
So they
whatever.
achieved a lot in educating both you and your...
Oh, well, Well, we haven't grown to be criminals.
No.
My brother John lives in Lane Cove in Sydney. He's a year and 10 months.
So your family was your mother, your father, and
my brother,
brother.
and I, yes.
two
Yes,
sons.
yes.
Okay.
But of course, digressing, my name is, of course, in Latin. It's Latin. It means lively. But this name, there's equivalent of it, direct equivalent in Italian spelled Vitale, and in Ravenna, the city on the east coast, up north of Italy, the ancient city, which was Byzantine, the second capital, next to Constantinople, there is a church of Saint Vitaly.
Okay.
It's
What
fourth century.
What was your mother's maiden name?
Very Mechik, very difficult to pronounce.
Better name.
A typical Belarusian name.
Okay.
Typical.
And Lupish?
Lupish means to skin.
Okay.
So it's something to do with skin.
Okay.
But my grandfather, my father's father, after they returned from Russia to their house, it was all overgrown, it was damaged, wasn't destroyed, so they had to live on something.
Yeah.
And what they did, although they made soup out of nettle, you know nettle?
Yeah.
Stinging nettle?
Yes.
There's a lot of it up there in that
It's
country.
good for you.
A lot. Well, they made that. I don't know what happened to the sharp bits, whether you swallowed them, I have no idea. Maybe they put them through some kind of cloth filter,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But they survived on that. However, my grandfather, his name was John. So John, my brother John. Anyway, and my mother's name was John. My mother's father was John as well.
John or Johann?
John. Oh, no, not Johann, no. That's German.
Just John.
John. Yeah, Ivan.
Ivan.
Whatever. He went to America 4 times just to go there and work, do some kind of work,
Yeah.
earn some money, and bring it back. But what he did, he would sew it in his clothing.
Okay.
Otherwise, they would have nailed him and put him in.
So, how many have you ever returned back to your
No,
family
I did
home?
not. My brother John did. He
Okay.
actually went, and he actually went to our town and the
Yeah.
village.
Yeah.
The church in the village is gone, but
Yeah.
the one in town is still there. I have an aerial photo of it
Wow.
that my son Alex took.
Yeah. All right. So you
And I
mentioned
was-
your wife. When did you marry? And
We married on 27th of October 1968.
okay. And where did you meet your wife?
I met her in the church. Interestingly, it was unusual because I met her. She didn't know that I saw her, but the way I saw her, this wasn't 68. This was 66. When I was standing. We have no pews in the Orthodox churches. It's all
Everyone
introduction.
stands.
No, we stand. And at certain times you can see it, but at certain times you have to stand. Anyway, but there are benches that you can sit on. In the there's the sanctuary and there's the iconostasis, I call it, and about the central door there's always some kind of icon. Generally the Last Supper. This particular icon there at number 31 Robertson Road, Centennial Park, is our second oldest church established in Australia by the Russian church or so. We had nothing to do with church in Soviet Union, no, we were a separate thing, because they thumped the church into ground anyway. Murdered 110,000 clergymen after 1917, and there's the first one was in 1924 in Brisbane, at 344 Vulture Street, Wollongabba. Anyway, it's now all buildings all around it. However, the third one was the one in Greater Cam. Oh yes, history.
In the country.
Yes, in the country. But anyway, I went there, and I used to drive up there, of course, and I came there, and there's that icon of Leonardo da Vinci's famous Last Supper, you know it. It's painted on the wall of a church in Italy. But anyway, and then it's sort of a little bit of an angle, so you can see they walk in the small gate from the street, from Centennial, so from Robertson Road into a church, short distance. So anybody who comes in, if you're standing in one place, you can see people coming in. And suddenly I was there, a nice reflection of Leonardo da Vinci's thing, a lady,
Yeah.
a girl coming in with a white top
Yeah.
and red mini dress.
Yeah.
It caught my attention. But then, she wasn't anywhere. But as you come into, you generally pick up a candle and you put a candle. So she was at that to the right as you enter. She was there being delayed. And then I saw her come in with a candle, and just in front of me, more or less. She put the candle on the stand there, lit, of course. And I then saw more of her, that same person. And she walked into a little alcove on the left, that's called a choir stand. It's a little higher than, elsewhere. Anyway, and she obviously was singing there. I couldn't pick her voice or anything. And I left her that. After the service, she disappeared into the back room, which was a small room where the Saturday school that she was teaching in on Saturdays, and they would have some bit of cup of tea there after the liturgy.
Yeah.
And then when I came the next time, I decided to join the choristers. And I did.
Yeah.
And she came in there, and she was a soprano, I could see her.
Yeah.
I didn't speak to her. But then, at the same, a little later, my brother came in. He had joined the choristers before, because he went to Sydney and left us here in 1961.
Yeah.
Anyway, John. And so of course, I spoke to my brother after the completion of the service, and then he said, "Well, look, I'd like to introduce you to Irene." And that was, he already was taking her out, so she introduced me. Automatically, what hit me was her eyes and the legs. They were superbly built legs.
Okay,
To
right.
my opinion, I mean, there's a saying in Russia, "На вкус, на цвет товарища нет," which means in color and in taste you have no friend. You know, so you like red wine, I don't like it. You like cloudy days, I don't.
Okay.
You
In
know,
colour and taste, you
And
have
taste, you have no friend or
Yeah.
comrade or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
Well, differ anyway. So and then so he introduced me, and that was the beginning. Then I came to an evening service there one day when I went to Sydney to see Sergei Eisenstein's Ivan the Terrible film. You've heard of it,
Yes.
of course. I had it screened at Tech College in 1957. I got it from Film Library in Sydney. It came by train, etc. Anyway, I went there and I saw it. So I came to the service. I stayed there for the duration of it, and it's still the time to see this film over there in some St. Peter's Lane, but King's Cross there, where there was film club there, like there was one in WA, and I got into my VW and I saw Irene walking on a footpath, obviously to the bus stop to travel to the street, the renting where she lived, about 2 kilometers away. And I stopped and I opened the door and I invited her. I asked her, "Could I give you a lift?" And she said, "Yeah, okay, all right." And so I dropped the, what's the street? Anyway, and so I dropped her off. But before she got out, I said, "I'm about now to go to King's Cross to watch Ivan Grozny," which means in Russian, Ivan the Terrible. Superb film by Eisenstein. It was voted one of the top films ever made. Anyway, and she said, "No, thank you." But I said, "Will you be in church tomorrow?" This was Saturday night. And she said yes. So I saw her the following day. Anyway, we got engaged in June, early June, in 1968, and got married in October 68. But then there's another story which I advise everyone who wants to know facts, historical treatise, researched, called Victims of Yalta. As you know, there was a conference in Yalta. Truman, Churchill, Stalin, and the French guy, whatever his name was. And this book was written by a distant relative of Leo Tolstoy, Nikolai Tolstoy. Nicholas, he's a British guy. He was born in England. He's a graduate of two institutions in England. I met him here in Sydney. I've got a picture of him and me next to him, and another guy who's now deceased, one of our people who was a council, on the staff of the council, Eugene. And what was happening there, he gave a talk, and he gave several talks. I was present, is amazing. That's why I'm saying people should now, in present day and age, learn what happened. Mm-hmm. Now, in 1946, yes, 46, Winston Churchill went to the United States by invitation, and he was inducted as a citizen of the United States. You know that, of course. And he was, after that, in Washington, he traveled all over the place, and in Florida he was at the time, sometime in 46. There were reporters, journalists following him everywhere, and then at one occasion he said this to them, to some of them: the further back you look, the further ahead you see. The man who wrote a 22-volume, The History of English-Speaking Peoples, this long, I never read it. I've looked through it in the Walden Library. By the way, I joined the Walden Library in March '51. The old thing there over there in Cowper Street, not the new one. Yeah. Anyway, I remember all it. So, well, in the children's section. However, you have to look back, behind you.
Yeah, yeah.
Why do we? I'm being funny here. Why do we have rear vision mirrors in the car? So we can see what's behind that.
Yeah.
I know Australian history quite well. I made it my job to read, but I always liked history, and I wanted to know. I'm a citizen, of course, have been since 1961,
yep.
Courtesy, Lord Mayor, etc. But the thing is, you have to look back. I know what happened in the past, in the 19th century, and even 18th in Australia. I'm talking about the events pertaining to indigenous peoples. Oh yes, but you mustn't forget it. You must look through normal glasses, not sunglasses, not rosy glasses, sunglasses, whatever, and just forget about it. Not to look. Two of our relatives, sort of aunt type thing, they went to USA. And one went to Canada. My son-in-law, David, here, he's a Canadian, true and true, but he's Australian, of course, from Vancouver. Anyway, and it's the best thing that ever happened to my parents. I'll put it in this idiotic fashion. We are sitting on two stools, and we are talking, and I'm speaking into this machine. The best place on our planet at this moment, on our planet, is here, in Australia. And also, I'm prepared to debate the point with anybody, whether it's Paul Jeans or your new Vice Chancellor or anybody. Anyway, it's got to talk. I'll say it in
just
German.
Arrived in Greta.
I'll say it in German. I'll say it instead of Scheiß. Which you understand. Anyway, but no, finish.